Hi folks, Dr. P here with a pretty long piece about the top 8 reasons why a game might shine, or stand out in other words. I'm not talking about puzzles, I'm talking about games. We have the usual caveats here that I expect people to listen to this rather than watch it unless they're hearing impaired or English is their second language. Here is a list of 8 and I'll go through each one separately. But first I want to define a little bit. Shine is going to mean different things to different players, of course, and it depends on what they think of as a game. I'm using the classic definition of game, opposed games, not puzzles disguised as games or parallel competitions, not storytelling aids, not world building aids. It's something with opposition that can affect you strongly where you can lose. Puzzles use different methods. Many of the playthings we call games nowadays are all or mostly puzzle rather than game. If there's a spectrum from game to puzzle, they're way over on the puzzle side. In pure puzzles, of course, you don't have to pay attention to what any other person is doing in order to succeed, and usually there isn't another person involved. Many single-player video games are puzzles, although perhaps not pure puzzles. The less interaction you have with other players, the more puzzle-like the thing you're doing is. Parallel competitions, and I think often of Olympics, many Olympic sports like swimming, can include several players, but the players can do nothing or next to nothing to affect the other players. Parallel competitions tend to be a form of a race. In the end, puzzles have always correct solutions. Or in the case of a parallel competition, it may have multiple paths to victory, which is several always correct solutions. Games, as I define them, do not have a single always correct solution. In fact, if they do, it's called a dominant strategy, and it's bad for the game, and widely agreed to be bad for the game. So the first characteristic is lots of player interaction. Classic games like chess are often chess-like. That is, you have to constantly pay attention to what anyone else is doing and react appropriately, or you will lose the game. You cannot play your own game in isolation. This means there must be a conflict of interest and there must be a way to lose. Now, pure puzzles lack player interaction. You're trying to find a solution. You're not worrying about what anybody else is doing. And parallel competition games, quote unquote, usually involve low interaction with the other players. The second characteristic is lots of gameplay depth. Now, depth is not variety. I'll talk about variety. Depth is about the quality of decisions. A shallow game, and that's the opposite of a deep game, has few decisions that make a difference, and they're all in your face. They're not hidden behind other choices. There can't be too many decisions or each one becomes meaningless, that is to say, inconsequential. Depth of a game is revealed by study and repeated play. You cannot see it all to begin with, no matter who you are, if it's a very deep game. Now, you can write many thousands of words about this. I have. It's hard to explain in a few words, but that's my attempt. A game will shine if it has lots of variety and replayability. Replayability comes from two sources. The first is gameplay depth, because it takes time to reveal all that's important in the game. Gameplay depth is the reason why people can play my game Britannia 500 times, a 4 to 5 hour game, because they keep seeing more depth, and part of that comes from what the other players do. The other source of variety and replayability is variety, of course. Changes in circumstances, in starting positions, in what happens. An example of a game that takes variety to an extreme is Magic the Gathering. Every year or two, it replaces many of the cards that are used in the game, so there are new choices that the players have to deal with and figure out what's optimum. That's maximizing variety or replayability. Another characteristic which people don't talk about often is clarity. This is not the same as transparency. Transparency means that it's easy to see in a game what you need to do to play it successfully. Many modern games are transparent because of the expectation that people are only going to play it 1 to 3 times. There's so many new games around that if the game isn't transparent, many people will give up on it after one play and say, oh, that's a dud, or just they're not interested. Clarity means that the rules don't get in the way of seeing and executing the strategies or the plays that win or lose the game. Games with great clarity rarely have complex rules, but they are quite intricate. Complexity is about the rules. Intricacy is about the decisions. And I have a separate video that's about complexity versus intricacy, and another one about transparency as well. Harmony is important in a game. One definition, I think I wrote this one: everything in the game feels as though it belongs there and contributes to the purpose and feeling of the game as a whole. Everything fits together in a pleasing whole. Nothing appears to be tacked on. It's not cleverness, it's not elegance. It's something that affects the game as a whole. It's about appropriate fit. Some games have it, some don't. There are many well-known games that don't have it but succeed anyway. But harmony helps a game stand out. True harmony. Player-centric orientation. The designer has to ask himself or herself, what is the player going to do? And is it going to be enjoyable for the target audience? Somebody put this as, it is a sin to waste the gamer's time. Well, of course, what is a waste of time varies a great deal between one gamer and another. But games with a player-centric orientation tend to be more enjoyable than games with a designer orientation or a publisher orientation. Appealing graphics are going to make games stand out. That's artwork, pictures, and in the case of the tabletop, 3D pieces such as miniatures. This is obviously important nowadays because people focus more and more on presentation and less on function in all walks of life as the decades pass. Some people will actually buy a game for its looks, however well or poorly it plays. I'm not one of them, but there are many people like that. Haptic characteristics. This is strictly for tabletop games, not video games, because it's the physical feel of the game, the textures and the shapes, the feel of the cards, of the board, and especially of the pieces and any other physical components. In this sense, it's an opposite of what you get in video games, which are all on the screen, though a game controller has haptic aspects. Now, you might say, what about fun? I think that the word fun is impossible to define as it depends so much on the individual's preferences. To say the game must be fun is meaningless. I used to ask ordinary chess players whether they thought that chess was fun. Half of them said yes and the other half said no, but they all liked to play. There are attractions in games other than fun, a great many attractions. In this video, I've been trying to identify characteristics that are likely to make a game enjoyable or make it stand out for marketing purposes. Fun just doesn't come into it. What about story? Well, this could be discussed at great length. I don't know of anybody who's written an entire book about story in games, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's been done. But it would have been done about video games. Some players want to be told a story. Others want to make their own stories. Those who want to make their own stories often want to make their own story with great freedom, while others want to make their own story within a particular context. But specific stories wear out once you know how they end. And in general, games are not good media for telling stories. Novels, films, and plays do a better job for a variety of reasons, especially controlled by the author. A story might bring you to a game, but it's the gameplay that keeps you playing, not the story. So the story is a marketing tool much more than a tool to make the game excellent to play. Now, if I made a list like this for puzzles and puzzle games, Many of these same characteristics would be included, but some would be different. Thanks for listening.